On this episode of CPR Ford Garage, showing you how to put gas into a Jeep Wrangler. Alright, so what we've got going on here is, this is my daily 2017 Wrangler Unlimited. And then fuel pump needs changed in Bruce, and Bruce has probably at least 15-16 gallons of fuel in the tank. So this is what we're gonna do. Still have the hose hooked up from testing fuel pressure to the throttle body, and then we've got hose running into the filler neck. So we're gonna power up the fuel pump relay over there and pump some fuel into the Jeep, make that gas tank a lot lighter and easier to remove. So far so good. You can see over there I just jumpered the fuel pump relay right over there on the fender well, and it's pumping it out. So while we're waiting for that, let's look at some stuff. Alright, so here are some new parts to rectify what we got going on here. Called up and got some stuff from Tanks Incorporated. Good people. Good place to deal with. That's where all of my fuel system parts for the initial build came from. Also got some Rock Auto parts to take care of the brake issues. So as far as the fuel pump goes, there was an incident about 3 years ago. I had just got the fuel injection and all that stuff going on the truck, and took a trip, a pretty decent sized road trip on the way home. Running low on gas, not any major towns around, stop in a very small town in Montana which will remain unnamed, get a load of premium fuel and start driving home. About a quarter tank of gas later, truck starts sputtering really bad, totally loses power. It stays running, but it will just no power. Wideband is pegged dead lean, like 21.7 AFR or whatever the limit is. So it's not getting enough fuel. Pulled over, tried to figure out what's going on. Couldn't figure it out, ended up limping along to the next town, and had to have my dad come rescue me with the flatbed. So got it home and tore into it, and it turns out, well, along with my tank of fuel that I bought from the small Podunk gas station, I also got a lot of free sand. And it was really fine sand too, which is unfortunate because it made it through the 5-micron fuel filter and up to the injectors and everything. But basically at the time, tore everything apart, cleaned it out. The fuel pump seemed to be okay. The fuel filter was plugged solid, so that was really my biggest issue. Totally plugged solid. So I replaced that and flushed everything out, put a new strainer basket on the fuel pump, and new gasket and everything. And the fuel pump I put in a jug with some clean fuel and kind of ran it. It seemed like it was moving plenty of fuel, so I just cleaned it up and put it back in. I really didn't want to spend $103 bucks, I think this was, on a new fuel pump. Everything seemed fine, it was pretty good. That was when I still had the Edelbrock Performer intake on it. So, fast forward like year and a half later, I ended up getting a Wyand or Weand, I'm not sure how you say it, dual plane intake for the 400. It is a Weand Action Plus is what they call it. And I actually took a bunch of photos of that, and I measured all the ports and everything. It flows quite a bit more air than the old Edelbrock Performer did. I mean, if you're after performance and you're doing a little bit more than a towing / RV motor or whatever, and building a 400, it's a better intake for sure. It flows a lot more air. So after putting that on, that's when I developed this dead spot at wide open throttle, big time. And so been pulling my hair out over that, and finally did some more testing as far as the fuel system goes, and it looks like either it's slowly gone down or the incident with the sand did in fact damage the fuel pump enough to where it won't flow fuel. So I actually did a pressure test, which the pressure is a little bit low. Did a volume test, also a free flow volume test, and the volume is quite a bit lower than it should be. This is a 255 liter per hour fuel pump, which should be more than plenty for this engine. The whole fuel system and the EFI should be enough for 600 horsepower, and I'm not making near that. This 400 is decent. I've seen dynos of similar builds, and it makes probably 360, 370 horsepower at the flywheel, and probably about 450 foot-pounds of torque. That's kind of a 400 thing. They can't breathe up top without better heads and intakes, so they make quite a bit of torque because of the long stroke, but the horsepower kind of falls off as the RPMs climb. So I built it with a 600 horsepower system in mind of possibly something later happening, like a 460 swap or something like that, built 460. I wanted to have room to grow, and with the EFI it doesn't really hurt anything like as much as it does going too big with the carburetor. So yeah, let's open this stuff. Alright, let's start with the fuel pump. Like I said, the folks at Tanks Incorporated are great. Even asked me a little bit about what happened and if they could help, and explained to them the whole gas situation, and they're not their fault at all, but they were totally apologetic about it and like, yeah, that sucks. I did call the gas station, of course, and talk to the owner, and they pretty much told me they wouldn't do anything, and there was no way that was possible. Yeah, I just even asked them just to give me my money back for the tank of dirty fuel they sold me, and they wouldn't even do that. So, all right, so this is all the stuff to replace my pump. Cork gasket. This is where the pump hat mounts on the top of the tank. And we've got, that's going to be the fuel pump in there. Sock, which pushes on the bottom. Always change that when you change the fuel pump. They threw me in the foam sleeve that goes around it to keep it from vibrating against the bracket and stuff, which I didn't really need because it's only a couple years old, but whatever. It was only a couple bucks. Now, Walbros. Walbros have a really good reputation for fuel pumps. In fact, a lot of Ford OEM pumps in the 90s, I believe, were Walbros. I know Fox Mustang ones, I'm pretty sure that those are a factory Walbro pump. So they have a really good reputation. However, there is a lot of knockoff ones going around. Tanks Incorporated has a big thing saying they only sell genuine Walbro pumps. If it's not, you can find pictures and stuff on the internet. There was a couple things. The Walbro logo looked a little bit weird on the Chinese knockoffs. Can't remember if there was something with the part number, and they did not say made in USA. Now, it's been a couple years since I looked, but there it is. Shiny, brand new, 255 liter per hour Walbro goodness. And some desiccant to keep it fresh. Nobody likes a stale fuel pump. It's got some kind of oil on it. Probably keep it from rusting, I would guess. So, and we got some Rock Auto goodness. I am a big fan of Rock Auto. Tell you what, if you can wait for parts, that's the way to go. They're kind of my go-to if I'm not in a big hurry. You can find stuff cheaper. I got quite a few parts when I was working on my 2005 Ford pickup with the modular 5.4 in it. But I did find when I did the timing chain and stuff on that, I found a timing chain set of OEM Ford parts on Amazon for about 800 bucks, which I think all the OEM Ford stuff would have been 1,300 bucks, even if you got a good deal from the dealership. So this is what I need to fix my rear brake issues. A lot of times at Rock Auto too, you can get good brand name parts for even cheaper than the house brand or whatever the cheap stuff is at the parts store. So, one wheel cylinder. Doesn't tell me which side. I guess I'm on my own to figure that out. So there's one wheel cylinder, which they are both leaking. Magnet. Sweet. Two wheel cylinder. And then this wasn't leaking or anything, but gonna be in there. I'm gonna be bleeding the rear brakes, and most of the rest of the brake system is new anyway. So I had replaced the front brake hoses when I did the suspension and lowering and all that stuff when I did the partial restoration. So rear brake flex hose. The one that's on there is okay, but now's the time to do it. They get cracked and checked, and I'll show you that when we pull it off. But this outer lining breaks down, and then there's like a weave, and then there's an inner rubber lining. And when that gets exposed, and after so many years of bending and flexing, what happens is they can burst, and I've seen that. And then you have no brake fluid, and you have no brake pressure. So good idea to change it. Now's the time. So like I said before, I was a mechanic in my former life. So when I put this electric fuel pump in the tank, having changed many electric fuel pumps in OEM vehicles with a full heavy gas tank, I had the foresight to put a drain in there. So let's see if I can get this going one-handed. Because many times, just to spite you, the fuel pump will die while the tank is full. And I don't remember if I ever verified it, but somebody told me once that gasoline weighs about 5 pounds a gallon, so not light. So, taking the fuel pump hat out, I've already zipped out most of the screws. There's a couple of them that are longer, and I left them started for now. Let's see. I can't remember how to do this. Maybe we just do that first. All right, I'm gonna have to fish it out of there, I guess. There she goes. So you can see that was the lock ring that fell off. It really is a pretty slick setup, you can see. Oh, looks like we managed to get more sand in there again somehow. Not good. All right, so this is the pump assembly. And this is how it comes apart. We got inlet outlet fitting on the top, vent, power ground. So once you get it out, you can see the pump in there, return hose, strainer sock, etc. The black stuff in there is crumbly bits of O-ring that fell in there as I was taking it apart. So what we're going to do is take the tray off of the bottom first, and I believe, yep, it's a 3/8. And this is a little tricky when it goes together because drop stuff on the floor. Now, this nut actually threads onto a stud that goes behind the pump, and the O-ring has to, or the zip tie has to slip down over it, so it's a little tricky. Let's see if I can remember. Okay. So we can see that is a bit concerning, but that's weird dirt. Maybe that's just from being in gas why it looks weird, but we're going to try to take a few steps to remedy that as well, because that is not good. Okay, get that guy undone. This zip tie, well, it'll just slip off, but I was going to say it can be cut because it's just a regular old one. The one that goes around the pump though and secures it to that screw is a weird one, so I will have to reuse that. Go ahead and undo the hose clamp here. And if you're familiar with the Fox Body EFI Mustangs, this is the same type of pump setup that they use. Just the actual pump part, not the whole assembly, obviously. So, get that past the nipple. It's gonna go ahead and shoot off of there and slide me in the junk. Oh, maybe not. So another thing I noticed when I was doing the little testaroo there is that it does not hold fuel pressure at all after the key goes off. There's the weird little clamp that the screw head goes into, so that's why it's a little tricky to put together. What I did last time was just squeeze the little tab in there to disengage and loosen that back up, and then I can put it all back in there, tighten her back up again. Something to look for on fuel pump failures, and it's kind of hard to tell. The inside of this sock will be full of little metal brushes that look like a wire wheel bristle brush. That's the brushes from inside of the pump that actually move the fuel. On OEM pumps anyway. This is a geo-rotor pump. G-rotor? Not sure how you say it, but so I believe it just has gears. I will look here. It doesn't look like there's any stuff inside of there. Got a little basket on the bottom. See if we can get that off. Stab myself a few times. Don't really see anything in there either. You can kind of see the gears down in there. That's all it is. So, I don't know. Who knows? I'm not a scientist. We'll check that all out later and see what we get. Well, America, there's been a delay on this video, mostly because I wasn't really sure how to end it off. After replacing the fuel pump, I still had the falling flat on its face lean at wide open throttle that I couldn't figure out. So, out of frustration and on a whim, pulled this guy out, 1-inch open carb spacer, and with as much fuel as I had dialed into the tune, that was enough to get rid of it. Now, I still have a little bit of tuning left to go, but it does show me that I should be able to dial in enough fuel now to cure that issue. So there's a couple things going on, I think. And this is just my theory, but air cleaner lid's upside down right now because I need to get a longer stud. A lot of times, carb spacers can help when your intake is a little on the small side for your combo because they add plenum volume. Essentially making the intake a little bit bigger. But if your intake is maybe a little bit on the big side, then they can exacerbate that problem. The physical work is done, and we're gonna go out and do some tuning and try to get this job finished up finally once and for all after a year and a half or so. I'm not a tuning expert by any means. I think part of the issues I'm also having is that universal EFI is not so universal. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed in the Fitech system for the cash outlay. It's just unrealistic expectations might have been a part of that, because if you think about how much R&D and tuning time goes into a factory EFI system, to expect to throw one on, you know, any random engine and have it run that good is pretty unrealistic. But the biggest issue is that quick transients like snapping the throttle open, yeah, that does not self-tune. Neither does startup. So the self-tuning EFI is a bit misleading. So here's what you can do with your lean tip-in lean acceleration problem. Go EFI tuning, accel pump. Now you would go in and add to here by tens until you eliminate your problem. That works for most people. That's great. That's as far as a lot of people have to go. I'm more than a little bit jealous of that, for sure. So now we have a problem here where 94.5 at 170 degrees fast accel is not enough. It still goes lean and stumbles, or it goes a touch lean and then the computer overcorrects and dumps a bunch of fuel and makes it go pig rich and it bogs. So if you need to go deeper than that, you're going to go down to Pro Tuning, which you have to go into the menu options display setup right there and actually go enable Pro Calibration Show. Okay, I did that a long time ago. So Pro Tuning, then we will go to accel pump. Now there's a whole lot more things in here. So here's accel pump. Slow accel I haven't done anything with, and I don't know if I'll need to yet. Accel decay. The accel pump at the fuel addition, it decays over time. And this is basically how fast it starts subtracting fuel after increasing fuel for your accel pump settings. I haven't messed with the decay stuff. Now, here's something. If you can't get enough fuel with your regular accel pump settings, DTPS ACC gain, that setting is, I think I've got it about maxed out here. I've got it turned up quite a bit. That is the setting for, it adds more fuel for accel pump the faster you're pushing the throttle down. The faster that you whip the throttle open, it's going to add a bunch more fuel. Also, the DTPS ACC max, that is how much fuel your accel pump function can add, and that is maxed out right now. If you see, it won't go any higher except to 198. A couple more things. If you have the latest
software update. I think it's T198i. You have this accel pump 3D table. Now, if what I've done here still doesn't work, what I can do is go in here and at every temperature setting, I can change the fuel that's added in the RPM range. So at 800 RPMs here, this at 158 degrees is going to add, I believe it's 202% of what my accel pump setting is. So at the lower RPMs, it will actually add more fuel, which is what I need because that is where my stumble is at. Now, I can't remember if these are stock settings in here or if I've turned these up or not. Because I have before, and then I'm put them back, and then I start over when I change a part to start over with tuning. So I don't know. Don't know if those are stock or not. But basically, you can add a percentage to what your accel pump function is through these ranges, and then like up into here, 2300, 3500. My problem has never been in there. If I whack the fuel in that RPM range or whack the throttle, it doesn't bog. So as you can see, it's adding less fuel up here. So instead of having a flat amount of fuel that's added, you can basically have a curve depending on how you set up this percentage. Just a tip, anytime you make a change to your tune, go back to the dashboard screen, shut your key off, and wait until the values blank out. Sometimes they don't save if you don't do that, but I think that's getting better on the new software. So let's go for a drive and see what we can do with this junk. We're now past the point of it falling flat on its face, and now we have the lean tip into rich bog problem. What I like to do is I'm in manual second gear. I'm out in the middle of nowhere. That way it won't kick down, and I can just be rolling. I'll wait till it to get to about to idle. Wait for it to get about to idle, and I'm gonna hammer it, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now you saw that little 14, ooh, backfire. Saw that little blip of 14 AFR, and then it went into the 10s, and that's when it nosed over. That is way too rich. So what's happening now is there's a little lean blip which doesn't actually hurt anything, and then the computer sees that, way overcorrects and dumps a bunch of fuel. So better than falling on its face, but that's what we have to cure now. I've pulled off, and as you can see, well, if I can get rid of the glare, I have added quite a bit of fuel to all the 800 and 1200 RPM temp ranges. So we'll go do another test hit and see if that helped. I apologize, America. There's probably a much more clever way to do this, but I'm just not that good with computers. So this is from my data log. You can see right when the throttle cracks all the way open, 95.5% throttle position, 95.5 on the TPS. The fuel it's commanding is 12.66, and what it is actually is 14.3. Like I said, that really doesn't hurt anything. You won't even feel that 14.3, but the computer sees it and says, this is no good, let's dump a crap ton of fuel in there, which it does. And you can see the AR for words are hard. Which it does, and you can see the AFR goes into the 10s, and that is when it lays over. So a few more changes in the accel 3D table, and that should take care of that, hopefully. As much as I curse the Fitech for being a pain in the butt, this is really handy to have all this data. And if I didn't say the way I data log, instead of only data logging what I have displayed on the large screen, I do it from the dashboard, which gives you the most data. So you can, maybe some things you weren't intending to look at, you can find other things that you weren't looking for. Well, that, as they say, is that. I didn't mean this to turn into a tuning episode, but hopefully you learned something from all of that. So it still does go a little bit rich now at full throttle when the fuel trim correction kicks in, but I'm hoping that it's close enough that that will work itself out with some more miles on it, which there's very few right now with the changes that I've made. So either that or I'll let it learn in other areas, and then what I'll end up doing is going in and limiting how much fuel the computer can add during adjustments, and that should take care of that as well. So here is a quick full throttle run just to show no more bog. So as always, thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell. More stuff to come.